Zeus said, wait Deimos, I can give you all the powers you need to defeat Ares, but I want you to promise to never do anything that would harm Olympus. And then Deimos said, fine, I won't do anything to harm Olympus. I no grudge against you or your people. My problem is with Ares, not you. And then Zeus said, he's your brother, but he's too ambitious. And then Zeus said, hand me your sword, Deimos. And then Deimos handed Zeus his great sword of chaos, and Zeus transformed Deimos' sword into the blade of Zeus, giving it all the powers of the Olympians. And then Ares shouted, no you old bastard. And then Zeus teleported away from there with Pandora's box, and that changed everything because I knew everything that would happen in the future, so I told them all how to change the future. And then Ares got angry and he threw another wooden spear at Deimos, but this time Deimos used his weapon to destroy the spear, and then he teleported to Athens right in front of Ares, and he raised his sword high, becoming taller than Ares. And then Deimos said, now we end this, brother. And instead of me fighting Ares, it was Deimos. And since Deimos has a more powerful weapon now that isn't made by Ares couldn't take his weapons or Deimos' infinite magic away. Instead, Ares tried to take everything away from Deimos, but when Ares couldn't remove Deimos' powers, then Deimos seized the opportunity to strike a death blow against Ares, and he stabbed Ares in the chest, killing him. And right after that he tried to erase his memories and all his nightmares, but he couldn't escape what he had done to me and all those innocent people he had killed. So like Kratos, he threw himself from the highest mountain in all of Greece, but this time it was me that caught him. And I said, what if I can give you what you want, brother? And then he said, it's all I want is for someone to erase the memories of what I did. And then I said, I can do it. And then I gave my brother Deimos what he wanted, something the Olympians never gave Kratos in the original storyline. And then I sent my brother Deimos back home to Sparta with my mother and then Athena, and then other gods appeared behind me smiling warmly. And then Athena smiled and said, hello little brother. And then I said, and I asked, hi Athena, how are you? And then Athena smiled and said, you know why we are here? And then I said, yes ma'am, I sure do. We are here to offer you the position of Ares. And then I said, I'll take the position of Ares, but I wish to change some things on Earth. And then I was allowed to change Earth into a large round planet that isn't flat but three-dimensional and round, and I even made our planet Earth invincible, giving me and Olympus more powers. Along with my brother Deimos, I had turned our realm into something more powerful, and I freed the Titans, and I apologized to them, but Kronos was kept prisoner for his crimes. I told the Titans they are free, but they are never to go against the Olympians ever again. And then I told my father Zeus that soon I must journey to the Norse land to meet Laufey and Odin's ex-wife. And then Zeus asked me, so it's time for not now? And then I said, I have saved Olympus and Earth, it's time, father, I must meet my future wives and marry them all in a polygamous marriage as it was intended to be. And then Zeus said, I wish to go with you, and we will also bring your brother Deimos, because Deimos is also in desperate need of a wife and Calliope needs a husband. And then I scowled a bit and I said, I don't know, father, Calliope is still very young and beautiful. And then Zeus said, Kratos, your daughter is 20 years old and she grew up very fast like you did, she's ready to be married. And then I went to Midgard with my brother Deimos and my father Ares, and I was introduced to Odin, and Odin spoke with my father and me, and I told Odin that I intend to marry Laufey and his ex-wife. And then Odin looked at me and my daughter Calliope, and Odin raised an eyebrow and he said, this must be your beautiful daughter Calliope that Zeus told me so much about. And then I said, yes, in exchange I brought her to marry one of your sons. And then Odin said, interesting, I will have her marry my son Baldur. And then Baldur looked at Odin surprised, and in this timeline Baldur hadn't been cursed yet by his mother, so Baldur could still feel everything. And then Baldur stepped in front of Odin and he said, I accept, and he kissed Calliope's hand. And then Odin said, it pleases me that our kingdoms will be united in this union, because Laufey is also my daughter and I also have certain reservations about my old ex-wife, but I'll allow it because I need your kingdom to help me stop Ragnarok in the future. And then Zeus said, my son Kratos is more than capable of doing that for you. And then Odin smiled and asked, really, is he really that powerful? And then Zeus said, my son Kratos is stronger than all the Olympians and the immortals combined. And then Zeus said, I also need a wife for my son Deimos. And then Odin said he can marry Thor's daughter.